Hi, Lolade, good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. I can hear you.
All right. So let's try to see if we can get a few more people before we commence. So let's wait for another 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, we'll start proper.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, guys. So can I confirm if you guys can see my screen?
Yes.
All right, no problem. So as usual, if you have any question at any point, you can just if you're on Zoom, you can unmute yourself and just ask. And for those that are following us on YouTube, you can um you can post your question on the chat box, and I'll definitely review it before at one time or the other when I go to check the chat box. Okay, so as I stated previously, we'll be working on Git actions for the two live coding sessions for this stage. And if you have gone through your course material at all, you would have probably seen a few introduction of what it is we are going to be doing here and what an action is used for. So Git actions, Git actions, well, that's for GitHub. They are very, very essential tools in ensuring that the CI/CD process is maintained, in the sense that it's a way to put a more granular level of automation than what used to be. So Git Action has provided the platform for people, for developers, orchestrators, and systems engineers to move from local development to um, production very, very quickly, which has always been the focus and basis of what I've been saying from the beginning um, of this terminology called DevOps. And Git is the most widely used versioning platform, and is also the most widely used source for code source source code, sorry, for source code storage. So this is a way for us to ensure that while everybody is building, what everybody is building can be integrated with automatically. And we did a brief demo last week in our last live coding session where I just showcased what a GitHub action is. So for this live coding session, we'll be taking it incrementally. So what we'll be trying to do is we'll be trying to like work with Git action from the granular level, then start fine tuning and adding a few other stuffs, just like we did the last time. So again, so as I say, I like to start with a clean repo. So I'll just come here and create a new repository for us to work on this. So exactly. So I'm going to create a new repository. And as I stated earlier, we won't be writing our action syntax. So we're going to call this git action lcs do. Okay. So this is going to be public, and well, that is that on that. So let us create this repository. So when this repository gets created, exactly, so it is what? Yeah, it is clean. So we'll be working on, so let me copy this HTTPS. We're going to be working locally, and I'm going to be switching to my VS Code. Okay. All right. So let me switch. I'm trying to switch to my VS Code. Window, exactly. So this is my VS Code page, and so let me just clear my terminal. So I don't think I have to go into what VS Code is. It's just a code editor for people to work on their code locally. So the first thing we'll be doing is that we will be cloning the repo that we just created. So that will be git clone. So to clone the repo, if you remember correctly, in the previous screen, I I copied the URL of that repository that I just created, and you can see this is the URL of that repository. So once I use git clone, so this is the git command line tool, and you have to have git installed before you can use this. But um that is not so. When we told you guys to take on the git course and all, these are the kind of the concepts that you guys would have seen there. So this is the git clone, and you can see, so once you have access, if you don't have access, it will tell you you don't have access to clone this repository and all. But if you do have access, oh sorry, I cloned into the wrong directory. Let me just start over. So let me delete this PowerShell and create a new terminal. So yes, git clone. So you can see now that the repository that we just created is showing on this part of the page. So this is the Explorer that shows the directory. That's basically the folder of where you are in currently. So I've cloned into that repository. So I have to change into the repository that is going to be housing the what? That will be housing the workflow. So I'm going to cd into the git action lcs do. Sorry. Okay, so now I'm inside this folder already, and if I do a list, you can see that it is empty. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create what workflows. We want to create the first workflow file. So to do that, so these are just commands. You can also, okay, let me do the first one. Let me just create it with my local, with this explorer here. So when, as you can see, when I click on here, this place is highlighted. So once I'm on this folder, this is the highlighted folder currently. This is a folder. If I change my screen, just to show you guys what I'm saying, let me change it to my Windows Explorer for you guys to see what I'm trying to talk about. So this is my Windows Explorer. If I go to my documents, and if I go to okay, let me try to use that. So documents, personal, git action demo, exactly. So in this folder, git action demo, so this is the folder that we just created. You can see that it is empty and totally contains the what, the .git directory. So I can just come here and start creating. So let me create a new folder, and this folder will be called .github, because if you remember correctly, I said that every workflow that you're going to be creating has to be in a folder called the .github folder. So in the .github folder, you have another folder called the workflows folder. So when you create something called the workflows folder, so inside here is where we can now start creating our files. So if we switch back to um my Visual Studio Code now, and when we are here, so you can see now that if I do ls once more, you can see now that it's showing me that I have a directory that is called .github. So I can change into that directory. cd means change directory. So I can cd into .github. So once I cd into .github, you can see I have a folder called workflows. So I can cd into workflows. So now I'm in this workflows folder. So this is where the files I'm going to be creating are meant to be. So I can just use this. So there's a way to do it with the command line, but I'll just click on with Visual Studio Code. You can create a new file just by clicking this option here. You can see that it has set a new file. So I'll name this workflow 1.yml. So all workflow. So because I have, when you are working with Visual Studio Code, one of the reasons why people like Visual Studio Code a lot is because of the fact that it has a lot of extensions that help you work with code easier, in the sense that you don't have to like be in the dark about whatever it is, whatever code or whatever syntax it is they are trying to write. So if you see this my current page, you can see that automatically I'm having a red, there's like a red attribution to this file that is trying to tell me that there's something wrong. So if I just try to come here, this should highlight the what the issue is. Is it? No, it's not, because it's empty. So starting again as usual. So let's come with name. So the name is going to be first action. First action. So if I try to highlight on this now, you can see it is trying to tell me why this is causing an issue. The reason why I'm able to see all of these helper tools, so this is because I have an extension. If I go to my extensions folder here, and if you can see my installed extension, you see that I have an extension for what? For GitHub Actions. So this extension ensures that when I'm writing anything that is associated with GitHub Action, that extension will help me what? Links. The word that the correct terminology for it is called linting. So linting is the aspect that's where linting is what helps us to ensure that whatever code it is we are writing conforms to the standard for which that's what that the standard and the syntax for which that code was what created. So as you can see now, it is telling me that it is there's a required property that is missing on, and that required property that is missing jobs. So if I click on this documentation, it will take me where? To the documentation for GitHubs, and we'll be going into that actually very soon. So that's the first thing, name. And then on, as I said previously, on is what tells us what makes this workflow, what makes this workflow on. So imagining a live scenario where you are creating a workflow for a development, the way it is most times is that there is a main branch for your GitHub repo. That is where the source code is stored. Then the next branch is called the dev branch. That is where every developer what submits a pull request to. So after every developer submits a pull request to the dev branch, then it is the job of the systems admin to what move the code that was submitted to the dev branch to the what to the main branch. But the developers also don't actually do what they don't actually push their code directly to the dev branch. The developers also will have their own respective branches where they will develop. So after a developer has finished developing on his own branch, he will then make a pull request to the dev branch with his own code. So imagine that kind of scenario where we have like 7 people working on a project. There are 7 different branches. Everyone are working on that project at different points in time, and immediately they are working independently. Let's assume they are working independently, not even assume, because all of the time they're working independently, and each person does not have to what wait for the other person to complete a piece of the code before they can make their own changes. So if they are going to be making their own changes, and they are going to be making their own changes, so we need a way. Let's say, okay, it's the job of the system engineer to always make sure that this code base is structured, is clean, and everything is moving to deployment. But it is going to be very tedious to always come to do that manually. So what GitHub, the flow, the convention most likely is that when there's a push to GitHub, sorry, when there's a pull request to the dev branch, your action will run to ensure that the branch, that is the base branch, the source branch that wants to merge with your dev, the action runs against that branch to ensure that the code that is coming into the dev branch is what is okay. And then you will now have an action that when a push, that is when you yourself merge it to the main branch. So this will ensure that the code in the main branch is what deployed as expected. So long story short, so when you say on, the first thing that we always include for demonstration purposes is the workflow dispatch. And as I said previously, the workflow dispatch helps us to what? It helps us to ensure that we can run the workflow manually. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to be adding there is when there's a push. So when there's a push to the following branches, when there's a push to the following branches, so this can work. Let's say the way you've structured your code is that it is when you have merged to the main that you want to deploy to production. So you can have an action, a workflow that runs immediately. A push is made to the main branch because you as the system engineer or the DevOps guy, you are sure that the code that is moving to the main, you are sure that the code that is moving to main branch is what is valid, and it's a code that can be what that is going to be deployed. So you can have an action that is in charge of taking whatever code is in the main branch and deploying it immediately. There's a push to the main branch. That's this. So we can also have a push to the dev branch. So that this dev branch, when there's a push to it, then this is also going to happen. So we are still seeing a lot of words here because we are still requiring the jobs property. So that's that on that. So if we come here now and say jobs, you can see that all of those red that we had, they have gone. Why? Because for any workflow that you are defining to be valid, there are things that must be in place. The first thing is the name. The second thing is the requirements of the event that will make that workflow run. And then the third thing is the jobs. And the jobs also cannot be left empty. The jobs also have to at least have one step in it. So for each job, so we have to say, okay, there's a job one, okay. So each job has its own stuff here. So this job, for every job, you have to tell the job what is going to run on. So that is what the runs on key is. So as I explained last time, this is Ubuntu latest. And GitHub, as I will show in a few, has a list of different runners that are supported that we can use. So this is the runs on, and then we are going to have the steps. So the steps are the things that are going to be done inside that job for one job to get completed. So as usual, the name. So you don't necessarily have to give a step a name, and I'll show that now. Let me call this um step without step with name. Sorry. Okay. So this is a step with a name, and then this is just going to run. This is just going to run echo. This is a step with a name. So you can be wondering that what is this one and what is this one doing. So the way this GitHub action works is basically everything you are defining is going to be run on like a computer. Okay, so depending on that's what this runs on that we're talking about here, that is what it does. So we are saying this is running on an Ubuntu latest. So when you say the one command is basically you saying that um run this in the what in the command line option of Ubuntu latest, of a system that has the Ubuntu latest architecture on it. Yeah. So that's what this run command is doing. So the whatever you type in the run command are things that you will naturally type in a system if you have that system with you physically, or let's say you have that OS installed basically. So that's what this here is saying. So the next step, so this step, I'm not going to give it a name. And you see that for this step, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to just say run. And this one will echo. This is a step without a name. Okay, so we have saved this. But as you remember correctly, this was done locally. If we go back to, if I try to go back to, let me just change where I'm sharing to the GitHub repo that we just created. So if I go back to GitHub repo, even if I reload this, you will see that it is still empty, because what we have done is just local development. We have not done we have not pushed the development from our local our local environment to what we have not pushed it to the GitHub repository that can be accessed for publicly online. So when you are working locally, you have to ensure that after you write your piece of code, you then commit, and after committing, you do what? You push that line of code. So I'm going to be doing using the terminal. So let me just clean this terminal. So I'm going to doing git add. So when you do git add, what git add does, I don't necessarily have to explain. It's just it adds when you use dots. It means that just take every new file, because Git automatically track files that are new in your repository. So when you say git add dots, you are trying to tell it that okay, every new file that has been created in this repository that was not there as at the previous time I ran this command, add them to the list of files that are meant to be tracked. So after doing the git add, then you do the git commit. So git commit. So after adding the files, you need to commit the change. So you are going to commit these changes, and you always have a commit message. So this is the first commit. Okay, so you can see now one file has been changed. There are 18 insertions to the file, blah blah blah. All of these are just what you just see. So after you do that, then you can do a git push. So immediately I do a git push, and you can see this has worked. So if I now take us back to the home page, okay, sure, and I now reload this page, you see now that what you have pushed is here now. So you can see that it has come from my local file So this .github slash workflows. This is the workflow. You can see this is the .github that we created, the workflows folder, and all of those kind of stuff. And if I come to the actions, you see that this is our first action that we just created. You can see that the action has even won already. Why has this action won? The action won because we have already specified that for every push to the main branch, then this action has to run. Okay, so that's why this action immediately we pushed it to the main branch. And since there was no issue with the since there was no issue with the syntax of the action and stuff like that, the action has run automatically and this action has worked. So if we go into the action and we look at the jobs, you see that for the jobs, you see this one is step with a name. So this step with a name, you can see that it has a name, and what we ran is echo this is a name, and you can see that that was printed out. And this is the other step. So this step does not have a name. What it just gave us was the command, the run command. And you can see that the run command is a this is a step without a name, and it ran this command, and that is the first thing. So with that, we can now start working. So as I said previously, as the one in charge of deployment and organizing the code base, they are always going to be the one to do the starting off and the heavy lifting. So the next thing we are going to be doing now is we will now be creating a new branch. Okay, so I'm going to be calling this branch the dev branch. Okay, so now that this dev branch has been created, so we can now go back to my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so let me go back to my Visual Studio Code. So in my Visual Studio Code, you can now see. So what we now want to do is, if you don't, once you have created a new branch and you want to change your branch, you need to do something that we call git checkout. Because if you don't do git checkout, anything you keep doing will be added to the, okay, just to show what I want to do. So if I come here now and add job 2, and this one also runs on Ubuntu latest. Okay, and the steps for this job are, as usual, name, step 1. So let me run. This is step 1. Okay, so let me leave that as it is. So if I save this, or if I come here and do something called git checkout, if I just do a git checkout, you see that this is the branch I'm tracking. So if I say I want to do git, so before I do that, I need to pull the origin again. So let me pull the origin. So what I mean by pulling the origin is because you are working on the same thing but in two different places. You're working on the same thing but in two different places. The first time when we worked here locally, we had to push our changes from our local development, where we had to push it to the online one. So now that we have made the changes online on the GitHub website, we have to bring those changes that we made online, we have to bring them into our local development. So to do that, that's why I'm running this command, the git pull origin. And if I run this command, so exactly, you can see now that it is saying that there's a new branch, and the new branch is what? The origin dev branch. Okay, so that's the first thing. So now I'm going to do a git checkout. What I'm trying to, so I'm going to, normally I'm trying to list the name of the branch. I think the command is git branches. I'm just trying to list out the different branches. Or is it git branch that we have? Or git main? So you can see that the git branch is still main, but be that as it may. So when you say git checkout and the name of the branch you want to check out to, so you can see now that I have switched to a new branch that is called the dev branch, and whatever I'm doing now is now on the dev branch. If I did not check out to the dev branch, and I had saved and I had pushed, whatever I was doing would have gotten pushed to the way to the main branch. So with this way now, any other person that wants to work on this code, what they have to do is they will clone this branch and they have to move to the dev branch. So there are things that we call there are things called branch protection rules. So with branch protection rules, you can ensure that no one pushes to the main branch if it's not from a specific email or from a specific user. So anyone on the team that is working on the code, once they clone this repository, they have to do what? Check out to the dev branch or check out to whatever branch it is they are allowed to push on. So even if they have the whole repository, because you cannot say you just want to check one repository, you want to clone one repository, you clone, sorry, one branch from a repository, you clone the whole repository when you are cloning. But so that's been done. So now I'll do a git add to add what it is that I've done now. So um git commit am. So this is the push to dev. Okay, so you can see now. So if I do a git push now, so you can see that after it pushes, it will tell you that this has been pushed to dev. The last time when we pushed, it was pushed to what? It was pushed to, sorry, last time that we pushed, it was pushed to main. Exactly. So it was pushed to main, but now this has been pushed to what? To dev. So if we go back to our code now on Chrome, and you see now that automatically this has seen that dev at that submission pushes blah blah blah. So if we come to our actions folder, the push to dev, um so the reason why this is working also, the reason why this is coming through is because when we wrote our code, we included that. So this is job 2. So the reason why this run automatically is because when we run our code, if we can just check this code here. So one of the things that ensures that our code run, or the events that triggers our workflow, is also a push to the what? A push to the dev branch, as you can see, push to the dev branch. So that will also initialize our code. So let us go back to Visual Studio Code and then do something else and try to like add more functionality to this. So this is this 2 years. So as I stated the last time also, this the reason why those jobs were running concurrently is because there's something called need. So now let us add a new event. So let me remove this because I don't want them to keep working anymore. But if I do this, I have to change it. Okay, let me just because what I want to do now is I want to stop this workflow from running every time we make a push to dev get. So let me just check out to main. So I'm going to have to do a few heavy lifting. Let me switch my screen so you guys can see that also. So I want to merge the current dev and main that we have together. So after doing that, then I'm going to edit the workflow to remove the dev, because if I just edit it in the main branch only, there will be a conflict with the code, with the workflow file that is on the dev branch. So if the one on the dev branch is saying that the one on the main should not run, but the one on the main branch will be giving more precedence. So immediately we have a push to the main branch, what will happen is that what the code will keep running. So to just do that, so since there are changes, I'm going to do compare and pull request. So after doing a compare and pull request, blah blah blah, create pull request. I'm just going to create this pull request. Okay, so you can see that after creating this pull requests, all checks are passed, blah blah blah, and then so I'm going to merge the pull requests, confirm merge. So I've made this pull request now. So now that the pull request have been merged, okay. So I'm now going to Visual Studio Code now, and then remove that line of code. that I made previously. So let me just change the screen that I'm sharing. Okay, so let me check out back to main. Git checkout main. So you can see that in the main, even though this was edited before. So exactly, so this is main. So I'm just going to save this now. Exactly, is new one. So if I overwrite, so the reason why this is not saving is because once I checked out, even though I had made a change to workflow one, the change I'm making is in the dev branch. It is not in the main branch. So there's a conflict. So that's what this is saying. So if I overwrite this, you see that in the main, this should come back. Workflow branches. So you can see. So if I try to save this now, this is working. So I'm going to click save this now. So now I've removed the main part from that branch. So I'm going to git add this. I'm going to git commit am. So let me just put this message removed dev events, then git push. So now I've made that change. Oh, okay. So the reason why this is causing an issue, so I need to do a git pull first. As I said, because we just made a change, we made a change online, and that change has not been brought here locally, and we're trying to push another change from our local development to the to the online environment. Let's just use that abstract word, to the online environment. So we have to bring in, so I'm going to pull origin to bring in the change. Exactly, so this now. So if I refresh this file, if I close this file, sorry, and open it again, you see that now the job 2 has been added. So now if I try to do a git push, so you can see that this has gone as expected. So our push now has been made. So if I go back to our if I go back to our online environment and try to check this, so you can see now that if I refresh this page, okay, it is taking some time. All right, so if you can see, remove the dev events, merge branch, blah blah blah. If you go into the workflow and we check it, the workflow file, so you see that now. So the only event that will cause this to automatically run when there's a push is the what? The main branch. So since that is out of the way, now let us go back to developing. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to git checkout dev. Um, let me see if there's anything on YouTube. Okay, nothing. So I've switched back to dev now. So let us start adding some things. So you can see that on dev still has this part where there's a main here, even though we have made the changes to the main. So to allow dev be updated, we need to do a git pull origin. So when we do a git pull origin main, so you can see that it has fast forward. So git pull origin main. So when you are in another branch and you pull the branch from which, because if you remember when we were creating the new dev branch, we created the dev branch from a previous existing branch which was main. So any change you make to the branch, that's the originator for which the new branch was created from. So any change you make to it, if you want it to come to the new branch automatically, you just do a what? Git pull origin main, and it can come. So you can see now that what this change has what automatically reflected in this what in this branch. So there's no dev branch here. So now let us add another event. So the event we are going to be adding here is the pull request event. Okay. So for the pull request event, we can say the types. So what type of pull request do we want this to work for? So we can say number one, opened. Okay, and then the next one is the what? Reopened. So these are the types of pull requests. So what branches should the pull request go to, or what branches are pull requests going to go to that will require this workflow to run? So the branches are the dev branch. No, let us call that the main branch. Okay, so because we are only using two branch for demonstration purposes, but if it was like I said earlier, where you know that other guys will have their own different dev branch, so you say that when a pull request comes to the dev branch, you action once, and then you have one that runs for when a push is made to the what, to the main branch. So we can save this now. If I save this now, I'm not going to do a git add. Let me just, I think I should change my window. Okay, so as you can see, so now I've added this. I'm going to do git commit add pull requests events. Okay, so if I add this, oh sorry, I did not add the tag am. Okay, so git push. So this has pushed automatically. So now let us go back to the git action. So if we come now to the action, so you can see that now, even though we have made a push to dev, let us see the push to dev. You can see that it's saying that in the dev branch, there's a push just now, but in our action, this is not what's running up. So because we have something called a workflow event, we can now say, okay, for this first action, we now want to run this branch. So let us run workflow. So now you can see, you can select what branch you want. So if you want the dev branch, you can run the workflow for the dev branch. If you want the workflow for the main branch, you see, I'll show you something that showcases the difference between the two just now. So to showcase what we just did for the pull request event, let us create a new branch. Okay, so I'll be creating a new branch. Let me call that add dev branch. Okay, so new branch. So I'm going to call the new branch add dev branch, and the new branch is going to pick from what, from the dev branch. So create this new branch. So now that the new branch has been created, let us create two pull requests. Let's go to pull requests. Okay, now let us open pull request. So we want to create a pull request. The first pull request will be going from where? We are going to be comparing the add dev branch, and it's going to be going to a base of the dev branch. Why this? Exactly. So this is to the dev branch, and you can see this is the add dev branch. Okay, so for this add dev branch, there isn't anything to compare. They're identical. Oh, okay. So let's do something here. Let's come here to just make all of these changes. Let's go to the add dev branch. Not that. It is so slow. So this is the add dev branch, and in the add dev branch, let us create a readme file. Okay. So let's add a file. Let's create a new file, and we'll call that file readme.md. So we'll call this readme.md. Okay. So this is to effect a change in the add dev branch, because before you can make a pull request, there have to be a change from the two branches that are what they are trying to compare before a pull request can be made. So I'm going to commit this directly into the added dev branch, and I'll commit this change. So exactly, so you can see that for the added dev branch there's a readme, but if I switch this to the dev branch, there will be no readme. This is not going to showcase in the dev branch. Exactly. So now let us go to the pull request. So let us create a new pull request just to showcase that when we create a pull request to the main branch, nothing will happen. But when we create a pull request to the dev branch, let me ensure that that's what I did in the code. Uh, okay, yes. When we create a pull request to the main branch, what will happen? The action will run. But when we create a pull request to the dev branch, nothing is going to happen. So let me say this is to dev, and we're going to be comparing added dev. Okay, so let me create this pull request. So if I create this pull request now, so as you can see, once this pull request is created, this branch has no conflict to the main branch, blah blah blah, but nothing like an action is being run. That's for number one. But if we now go back to the pull request and create a new pull request, okay, so for the main branch, this might actually not work because the workflow is not on the main branch, it's on the dev branch. But let's just see. So now let us create this pull request between the main branch and the dev branch. So let's create this pull request. You should see this action running rather than just it saying that. So you can see immediately we created an action, and you cannot match this request until these two actions until they pass. So automatically, so you see this button got highlighted after these two checks got passed. So this action was initiated by a pull request to the to the main branch. But when we made a pull request to the dev branch, we did not have that. You can see that all we just had was a pull request created, and we can match that pull request. So that is we showing that you can, because of what made that possible is because we added a line here that says that this workflow under this one, when a pull request is opened or reopened, the action will run. So for you to see what we mean by reopen, so for this action, if I close this was the pull request that we made between added dev and dev. If I close this pull request, okay, and let me reopen this pull request, you can see that there's still no action saying that it is running. All it just checks for is if the branches can be merged, and that's all. But let's go away from here and go back to this add pull request event. If I close this pull request, you see that this pull request has been closed. If I reopen it, so that's what the reopen that we use there, that's what it entails. Immediately I reopen this, you can see that the checks run again. So that's based on what we said. We can also have a pull request that happens for when a pull request is closed. All you just have to do is to come here, and here you just add closed. So when you do this, you ensure that immediately a pull request is closed, what is going to happen? An action will run. So these are the kind of granularities that you can add to your work profile. So before the end of today, I want to show us the documentation for workflows. Let us see this documentation and see that all of these things that I'm doing is not as if known them before. They are all documented, and since they are documented, you can get everything what when you need them. So if you come here, exactly, so this is the GitHub Actions documentation. So you can see this is docs.github.com/actions. So when you want to create a new action and you have an idea of whatever it is you want to do, you get you once you have an idea of whatever it is you want to do, you need to be able to work with the documentation to see how best it is based on the syntax and the syntax for workflow, how best it is that you can make that happen. So you can see learn GitHub actions, workflow, blah blah blah, and all of this kind of stuff. They even have examples where you can publish Node.js using this, all those kind of stuff. But what I'm actually concerned about is this using workflow section. So let us see the about workflow section. So in this article, triggering a workflow. So you can workflow syntax, you can see defined using YAML. So you can see this is them explaining what all of these are doing. On name, learn GitHub actions. On see specify the trigger for this workflow. Job groups together, steps, blah blah blah. So this is them explaining it. So if you come to this part where they say this part where they say workflow syntax for GitHub action, that's under here. So workflow syntax for, you see this is the name, then this is the one name. So one name is when you use something probably apart, because one name, when we go back to this, you can see that for the actions that have been run, you can see that in this one now, this one is the name of this action is different. The name of the action is first action, yeah, but in this place the name is add pull request, the name here is add pull request, the name here is merge branch, the name here. So the reason why this one is having different kind of stuff because there's no one name. So if there's no one name, what's going to happen is that GitHub is going to use the name of the latest commit. You see, if one name is omitted or is only one sprite, then the one name is set to event specific information. So if it is triggered by a wish, then it is set as the what, the commit message. So if you don't want your workflow to have a different name each time it is run, then all you just have to do is to specify a run name. And when you specify a run name, anytime this workflow is on, be it from any event, it will always have this name. So this is the on that we use. So on, push or fork, multiple events, label, types, using filters. So if you want to use filters, so you might know that okay, then because you are the orchestrator of this whole pipeline, you are the orchestrator of this development flow. So you might tell new developers that when they want to, for example, you see that I created a new branch called Ade Dev. So you can say for every developer on the team, when they want to create a new branch, they just have to use /dev to end the name of the branch. So if they want to name it if they want to name it Williams, it will be Williams Dev, Williams slash dev. Sorry, not slash, dash dev. Anybody, or if they want to name it Lolade, it will be Lolade dash dev. But what you know is that for every developer, they have to end their what? They have to end their branch name with that dev. Then you can use the filter to say that for every branch that has what? A double asterisk and .dev, then that is when you what? That is when you are going to run this workflow. So that is using filters. So this is them specifying on. If you see in this article on the right hand side, they list a lot of things: environment, different kind of stuff, secrets, job IDs, and all of those kind of stuff. But even in the part of we use workflows, store artifacts. So there's nothing you want to do. So for example, this part of for example, if I go to workflow syntax to show you this part of pull request and stuff like that, it does the, if I come here and say on push, so if I come here on pull request, so on pull request, you can see excluding parts, blah blah blah, including and excluding git diff. So on pull request, so about comparing, so if we click on this, you see to take you to another place that gives you what, an idea of how you can do all of this, how you can compare different branches. So this comparison of branches is actually used when is used for GitOps pipeline. So but I won't really go into all of that now. But basically what I've just been trying to say is that for anything you want to do in this workflow, the workflow you can have what, it can be done automatically. When you come to the GitHub action, the GitHub docs for GitHub actions, you'll be able to have an idea of how, what syntax you are going to use to get your stuff working. So that's a basic introduction. So the last thing that we're going to be doing for today before we meet next week is we are going to be introducing something called inputs, and we are going to be doing this on the workflow dispatch part. So under the workflow dispatch, you can have something called inputs. Okay, so if you have something called inputs, you need to define what each input is. So the first input we are going to be having, so to show that, let us come here just to show you how I would do it normally. not working on it. So when I was researching on it, okay, how do I provide inputs to workflows? So I'm going to come to this workflow syntax, and from there I'm going to start from there. So on. So I'll go to this on and look for workflow dispatch. So you can see this is on dot workflow dispatch. So this is on the workflow dispatch, and you can see that workflow dispatch has inputs. So this is how to define each input that you want for workflow dispatch. So after specifying the inputs, you specify the input name and describe the type of input. So let us say this input is let's call this one name. Okay, or no, let's call this input one, just to be as generic as possible. So input one. So the details for input one is going to be, let's see, for the details, because I like using double quotes, but apparently this like something. So this is the first inputs to the workflow. Okay, yeah, so you can see that this is telling me that there's an issue. Unexpected value details. Okay, is it detail? Let's go back here. Okay, so it's not details, it's description. Okay, so that's the description. So what's the next thing we need to define? We need to define if it's required or not. So is it required? Let's make this one required. Let's make that true. So we'll define what type is it. So if it is required, then let's give it a default, because if it is required and they don't provide anything, so okay, so the default is going to be one. All right, so the type is going to be a string. Okay, that's good. So let's go to input 2. Let's define those two inputs for the sake of this demonstration. So input 2. Okay, so description for input 2. This is the second input to the workflow. Okay, so is this one going to be required? No, this will not be required. This is false. Okay, and then default. Let us provide default for this. Let's just say that this is also of type string. Okay, but you can see according to the documentation, if you want it to be of type choice, if you want it to be of type boolean, if you want it to be of string, if you want it to be of type environment, you can just define all of this in the input. So let's leave this for now and save this. So as usual, I'm going to do a git add, git commit, added inputs, git push. So if this has gone as expected, then when we go to our home page, so if we refresh this page, let's just refresh this actions page. So our changes will occur. So now let us click on first action. So one thing we want to do, you can see that if we want to select this, if we want to run this action for the main, you can see that it's not showing the provision for any of the inputs that we just specified that we're going to be wanting. But if I switch back, okay, to say that let us change to the dev, you can see that automatically these are the inputs, and without providing this required input, so you can see that it has this star here asterisk to say that this is required. So if you don't provide this input, this workflow will not run. If I try to run this workflow, you can see you have to fill out this field before this workflow run. So as usual, the default was 1. So this we can decide not to provide this, and if we run this workflow what it has been successfully requested and it is going to run as expected. So you can see this first action is already being run. So it is cool providing all of these values, but then how do we get all of these values? So let us go back into the job and let's call this job 3, or no need to call it job 3. Let's just go back to job 1. So let's change this to print print inputs 1. Okay, so if this is going to print input 1, so the only way we can get that input is to use this. This is the way you get input. So these are called contexts. So you can say input 1. So this stuff here that I just did is called context in terms of GitHub action. If I try to go to the GitHub actions, can I show where this is? So I think it should be somewhere around here. So there are different contexts that you can use when you are trying to exactly, these are job level contexts. So these are job level contexts, secret context and stuff like that. I've forgotten the part of the documentation where it is actually, but it should be somewhere, probably using job and then build and test deployment and stuff like that. But probably by the next time. But once you go through the documentation, I've forgotten the part of documentation where it is, but if you search for it online, GitHub context or something, or let's just, to clear all doubts, let's come here and say GitHub action context. So let's just search for this. So if you search for GitHub action context, so you can see, if you click on exactly, so this is the documentation for GitHub, and you can see that they have under what context. So it is under what part? Learn GitHub actions, I think, exactly. So context. So there's the variable context, there's the environment context, there's the job context, jobs context, steps context, inputs context. So what we are using is the inputs context. So you can see example of the inputs context, and you can see that on workflow call, this is how you get the input context. You can see it here. So this is how you get any context at all that you want to get from what in a GitHub action. So this is we getting the input 1 context and then printing it out. So now let us try to do something. Let's just save this and showcase this first. So then we'll do the last one. Git add dot git commit. Okay, I have another LCS by 10 12:30, so I have to wrap up with this very soon. Git commit, let me just write a message. What is this? Okay, print inputs. Okay, git push. All right, so now let us go to this. So this must have run successfully already. So you can see. So let's go back to first action and then let's run this workflow. So if we switch to the dev branch, you can see. So this is the dev branch. This is one. And let's run this workflow. So the first workflow should do what? The first workflow should print out what? 1 as the output. So this is the job 1. Let's go into job 1. So you can see print input 1. So if I try to go into this print input 1 job and see what this did, uh can this turn on any faster? Okay, so let's go into that. It's probably a network stuff. So that's job 1 still trying to wrap up with all of his stuff. Okay, so this is job 2. So job 2 is working. Step 1, this is step 1, blah blah blah. So because this is not done running yet, we cannot start seeing the details, but you can see that this is going to print input 1, and since it runs successfully, that means there is no issue. What it's just trying to do is to just clean up the container that it was run with. Okay, should not take this much time actually. So why we'll come back later. So let us also use something where we use an input to know if we are going to skip a step. So let me say skip step. Skip step inputs. So if there's a skip step inputs, this will not be required also. The description. Skip a step if true. Okay, so we're going to skip the step if true. So the default is going to be false. Okay, and the type is going to be boolean. So you can see that the reason why it was showing an error before, if I remove this, so the way to comment out in action is by using asterisk. So you can see boolean encountered, meanwhile the default is string. So if I specify this type to be a boolean and I save this now, so I'm going to add this. Okay, no, I've not used it yet. So what I'm going to now do is for this job here, this job 2, if I'm just going to use that what this context, let me just copy and paste this. Control C, Control V. So this is going to be what input dot what skip step. So if the input dot skip step is false, this job will be skipped. But if the input dot skip step is true, this job is not going to be what skipped. So let me save this and let me add this git commit am skip step inputs and then git push. Okay, so let us try to come here now and see if we can finally access. So you can see now, so in the print input one, you can see that this ran echo one, and instead of if you go into our code, you can see that what is there is echo input the input one, but on this in this page it has what automatically changed to what one. So that's that one. That so if I come now, so let me confirm that this has been pushed. Okay, this did not push successfully. Let me push it again. That's network error. Exactly. So this has pushed. So if I come back here now, I'm trying to run this workflow. So you see that if I run this workflow, switch to dev, all of these inputs are going to show. So this is one. So I'm going to, so you can see the way it works for Boolean. So if I mark this, this will be true. The workflow will run. If I don't check this, the workflow is not going to run. So let me just do this and say one workflow. So based on what we have here, we should see that what the job 2 is going to be skipped and it will not run, and only job 1 is going to run. So you can see job 2 was automatically skipped. Why? Because based on the input we have used the if condition to say, okay, if this input is false, then this job is not running. But if this input is true, then this job is going to run. Okay. So with that, we have come to the end of today's live coding session. Is there any question, anything that anyone would like to ask before we end it? Because I don't know. I don't think anyone had something to ask, because I said if there was any question, you guys could stop me at any point during the way. Okay, since there's no question, then you guys have a wonderful day. You can, as usual, the video is going to be, it's recorded, going to be on YouTube. So you guys can just refer back to it anytime you want to and try to practice. So one thing you guys should be very familiar with is using documentations, because for anything it is that we're going to be doing, you can't know everything. You're not the creator, but there's a documentation to ensure that you are able to use it and use it effectively. So I wish you guys a wonderful weekend, and bye bye for now.